Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Jimmy Duster Music Channel. With myself and the incorrigible Luddite joining me here today. This is a special episode. This is my birthday episode, 55 today. So thanks for everyone who sent me happy birthday wishes, including yourself.
Yeah, happy birthday, Jim. I know that's a big year, man.
Yep.
I am not looking forward to it. I'll be completely honest, but
Well, I did hear a piece of encouraging news. I hear that scientific study shows that people who have the most birthdays live the longest. So
yeah,
got that to look forward to.
yeah, you do, yeah. No, happy birthday, man.
And in addition to that, this is our last episode of the year. So we'll start fresh in January with some exciting new material. I'm going to be touring with a Christmas band, and Mr. Luddite and myself will use that time to do some planning and for some future shows. And as always, please like and subscribe to our channel, comment on our video, let us know what you'd like to see in 2023 from us, topics you'd like us to cover. Today's topic special for both of us. It's our 5 favorite Pink Floyd albums. And Pink Floyd was a band that I know influenced me greatly. They were one of the first bands I remember listening to as a youngster when The Wall came out, and was on my turntable constantly and had the final cut, and actually went through a period of time where I even liked the album The Final Cut for a little bit. And then once I listened to it more and more, it won't be showing up in my top 5 today, maybe yours, but got to see these guys in concert, and they've just had a big influence on my understanding of music, and really the band that turned me on to a more progressive style of music. I went on to get into the King Crimsons and Genesis and some other bands after that, but never as much as what I have listened to Pink Floyd over the years. They've long been in my top 5 favorite bands of all time, if not number one. And Jeff, how'd you get turned on to Pink Floyd?
Again, I want to wish you a happy birthday, first of
Thank
all,
you.
and yeah, like I said, 55. That's I'm 2 years off, so hopefully I handle it as well as you do, because you're handling it really well. But Pink Floyd for me, they go way back. My dad actually kind of turned me on to Pink Floyd, so there's you know, something a little bit sentimental there. But we go back to the laser light shows, and Pink Floyd, to get technical, using a fancy word for what a lot of us feel and sense, they were probably there's no probably about it. They were my first real taste of what we call synesthesia. And that's just when someone senses something through a different sense. And in the case of Pink Floyd, it's the visual aspect of their music. They're far more visual than their, the other major classic rock bands. And I think we can kind of break it down, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, and the Who. That's kind of the big 5, right? Bowie, Prince, they're kind of their own thing. That's a little different. But as far as the big 5 major classic rock bands, I think I just listed them off. Pink Floyd is far more visual than the other 4, and that what has always drawn me to their music and what still draws me to their music. They're also the most profound, most cinematic, and most imaginative. Style-wise, they simply have the most depth, and that's why they've held up for me the most. Again, the laser light shows, I remember that, seeing, I think it might have been the Ohio State Fair, if I recall correctly. You get off the Himalaya, you're going around in circles. You see the carnies in their red and white striped shirts. They're blaring Pat Benatar and ZZ Top. Then all of a sudden you go into this other world. You walk in and you hear Dark Side of the Moon, and the colors and the spectacle just comes alive.
They all
Um,
had those mirrors too that you could win at the games with, much like I have behind me here, that Dark Side of the Moon cover visual on them.
yeah, and then like you, I saw them at Ohio Stadium later 2 times. Um, their first show, I will, admit I was definitely out of it the first time that I saw them. Um, I remember some things about the show, but I remember the colors and the music, but I really can't tell you what happened. Second time was different. I was, very coherent the second time that I saw them, and it was a much better show for it. And there's something about Pink Floyd, they've always been labeled as a drug band. I don't see that at all. Um, they're best enjoyed when you're completely sober. There's a real emotional vibe to their music that still gets me. And again, the colors and the cinema and the epic grandeur towers above the other 4 bands that I mentioned. So um, I also saw them twice, and their music definitely still means a lot to me. And last thing I want to mention, um, and I'll get to this later when I review one of the albums, but I'm ready to start running them down.
All right. Um, I'll go first tonight. How's that?
Go ahead.
Fine. I view really the Pink Floyd catalog as 4 real distinct eras. I think you had the first era, the Sid Barrett era, a little more psychedelic in its influence, and then you went on to the post Sid Barrett. You had one, maybe 2 albums, I think, with Barrett and Gilmore.
Just the one that was just Saucer Full of Secrets. That was the one where
Yeah.
Sid and David. Well, it was mainly David, but Sid played on a couple tracks, and one of the tracks, Saucer Full of Secrets. Well, excuse me, no, not Jug Band Blues was his swan song. It's very, very sad song.
Yeah.
It's also very poignant, but that was the one record that all 5 members were on was Saucerful.
Yeah, so you had the Sid Barrett era, and then the post Sid Barrett era. The first part of it really included contributions from all band members. Then you got into where you still had the main 4 guys, but it was really almost, they became almost, at least to me, became almost like a Roger Waters solo project. And then of course the split of the band for several years there, and when they returned, it was almost like it was a David Gilmour solo project without Roger Waters in the band. So I see them as having 4 distinct eras, and you'll notice that my top 5 all come before that, what I consider the Wall Final Cut era, where it was kind of a Roger Waters solo project. And my number 5, I went with an album that I had kind of forgotten about when we first started talking about doing this. And when I went back and listened to it, I thought, you know what, this needs to be in my top 5, and that's Umaguma.
Wow.
You got the live side, Astronomy Domini, Careful with That Axe, Eugene, Set the Controls for the Heart of the Sun, Saucer Full of Secrets. Just a great live side. And I think this and maybe Live from Pompeii was kind of their only live projects in the early years. You didn't hear a lot of live music from them, and really what was an era of live music. There was a lot of live music being tossed about in this era, but they are a band that's kind of tough to take their live show and put it into a strictly audio format because of the visuals and some of the things that you were mentioning. But this live side to me holds up well. Then you get into the studio side, which was really 4 distinct individual projects. You have the Sisyphus instrumental, Rick Wright's composition for the album. You have Grantchester Meadows and several species of small furry animals with about 40 more words at the end of it. I don't even remember the whole title, which are Roger Waters' 2 contributions to the album. And to me, Several Species is kind of a throwaway song. It's more of like just odd percussion and kind of thrown onto an album, and kind of a throwaway song. Then you got the Gilmore penned "The Narrow Way," which I think is a fantastic contribution to this album, and it ends with Dave Mason's Grand Vizier Garden Party, and including a 7-minute drum solo by Mr. Mason on that one. And I'm usually not a big drum solo guy, but I really like that song. And to me, it just deserved a spot in the top 5 with Umaguma.
Interesting pick. And my number 5 is going to be kind of an off the beaten path pick as well, but it's not Umaguma. But I like Umaguma. I do prefer the live side of it.
Mm-hmm.
The studio side is, I don't know. It's kind of like they were going for the White Album a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it was inspired by the White Album, and I don't think the studio side is that strong. It's not even as spacey as some of their other stuff. It's okay. The one song on the studio side that I love, I even love the bird noises, is Grantchester Meadows.
Mm-hmm.
I really love that song. They do Simon and Garfunkel better than Simon and Garfunkel. That is a beautiful song.
Yeah.
And watching David and Roger both playing acoustic guitar on that song, I've seen that performance before in San Francisco, I believe in 1970. That's just an incredible performance. Other than that song, I'm not that high on the studio side, but I do like the live side a lot. However, I'm much more of a Live at Pompeii guy. I love Live at Pompeii. I'll just go on record and say Live at Pompeii, even though there's no audience, if you throw the art and the music and the spectacle and the colors and the visuals, you throw them all in together, it's one of my 2 favorite live. I'm not saying it's the best, okay, but it's one of my 2 favorite live albums of all time, along with someone else's. So anyway, that's a great pick, Umaguma. My number 5 is also off the beaten path, Jim. And I got to pull it out. I'm going to show everyone Umaguma because I don't think Jim brought his props. This is Umaguma, by the way. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I almost forgot, Jim. I apologize. I don't have most of these records on vinyl. I have a few on vinyl, but it's David Gilmour in the front, then Roger, then I believe the next would be Nick Mason and Richard Wright in the very back doing some kind of weird yoga. Rest in peace, Richard Wright.
Yeah.
But that's the cover to Umaguma. My number 5, however, is going to be the soundtrack to the film More, which is the album before. Oh, I put out Saucer Full of Secrets. Wrong album, folks. My apologies. Soundtrack to the film More. That is my number 5. It's not a masterpiece, but this isn't about masterpieces. I have a couple masterpieces that did not get in my top 5. And those are Wish You Were Here and Animals. They're masterpieces, but we're going by our very favorite ones at this time. And mine's going to be the soundtrack to the film More. There's just some beautiful songs on here. I love Cirrus Minor. It's a gorgeous song. It's kind of spacey. The Nile song is the heaviest song Pink Floyd ever recorded. It's a downright heavy song. It's been covered by the Melvins, among others. Then also on side 1, Cymbeline. Absolutely gorgeous song. The thing about this record is it plays like a soundtrack. Okay, it's not coherent. It's disjointed. It's in some ways it's like David Bowie's Low, but it's a soundtrack. But it's not as strong as Low. But there's something about this listen, and it's also Pink Floyd probably their absolute spaciest. On side 2, we've got Main Theme, which opens side 2, and Dramatic Theme. They sound kind of similar, but this is really going into the cosmos and getting away from the psychedelia, kind of the psychedelia space rock mix they had on the first couple records. We are going into the cosmos now, folks, on Main Theme and Dramatic Theme. There's also a blues number on side 2 that I really appreciate called More Blues. It sounds like space blues. That's my kind of blues, space blues, all right? So I'm a big fan of this record. I think it's really underrated. Yes, it plays like a soundtrack, and it is disjointed, but I'm a big fan of the songs and the record and just the feel of it. And I think it's a great start to what they're going to become. And it's my number 5, the soundtrack to the film More 1969. And I've never seen the movie.
Good choice. That's an album I've listened to before. It's been a long time. I'll have to pull that out and re-listen to it again. So thanks. All right, on to number 4. For my number 4, again, we're counting down our favorite albums and albums that mean the most to us. And this one obviously means a lot to me, being in my top 5. Probably just from an overall standpoint of the musicianship, the writing, the production, everything involved, probably their best album. It's a solid 10 out of 10 album. Just ranks so low for me. I don't know why, other than that I think there's 3 more that I like better than this one, and that's Wish You Were Here. Of course, you have Shine On You Crazy Diamond, Welcome to the Machine, Have a Cigar, which I know you're a big fan of, Wish You Were Here, and then the Shine On reprise at the end. So really the band's tribute to Syd Barrett, wishing he was here, and he was the crazy diamond in the whole Shine On You Crazy Diamond songs, 2 sections of the songs in that. And I think this album, just for its memorable riffs, everybody knows the little vamp on a G chord at the beginning of Wish You Were Here, and how many funerals has this song been played at over the years? And everybody knows the da 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 from Shine On You Crazy Diamond, just a simple little guitar riff, and that's what I think made Pink Floyd such a unique band, is they were able to just play the simplest things but relay so much emotion in those simple things. And you could tell with songs like Shine On You Crazy Diamond just how much respect they had for Syd Barrett. And
more about that for me later, but
how much
yes,
love they had for him.
Absolutely correct.
So that's my number 4, Wish You Were Here. Fantastic album. If you want to hold it up, I know everybody probably knows what it looks like.
I'm not going to, I actually don't have this record on vinyl anyway, but I don't have this on vinyl. It's definitely a masterpiece, but I have these. It's got the bag. It's really a pain to, on the inside of this. Here, I'll go ahead and pull it out because I love you, all of you. Okay. That's the cover, and I guess it's Deal with a Businessman or something, right? And Pink Floyd really had a hate affair with the music industry, I think, and the machinery behind it. Yeah. This is Jim's number 4, and it's not among my top 5, but it's an absolute masterpiece. Have a Cigars and Welcome to the Machine are not favorites of mine. I like them both. It's not like we're talking about Led Zeppelin Hot Dog or anything like that, but they're not among my favorite Pink Floyd songs. But Shine On You Crazy Diamonds is one of my favorite Pink Floyd songs. All 15 minutes of it. It's such a powerful, just emotional roller coaster ride. And the musicianship on it is brilliant. And Wish You Were Here. What else we can't even say about that song? It's one of the deepest songs ever recorded, and maybe in the classic rock world it might damn well be the deepest song ever recorded. And yeah, it's a great pick, Jim. My number 4, I had to deliberate about this one a little bit, but for me it's going to be the debut, Piper at the Gates of Dawn, with Syd Barrett as the leader of the band at this point, before things went in a different direction for Syd. I think it's important to realize to anyone who doesn't understand the entire history of Pink Floyd, the only band that can really be compared to Pink Floyd that is a major well-known act. I know a couple others who can be in terms of group dynamics and mythology, with people coming in and out of the band. But in terms of acts that you all know, the only band that you could really compare them to in terms of mythology is Fleetwood Mac. There, there are some similarities, I think, with Peter Green and Sid Barrett. Um, with the lineup changes in Fleetwood Mac and then some of the drama in the band. Well, there was drama in this band too between Roger Waters and David Gilmour, but it all started with Sid. Every single thing that they ever did in the future, it all stems back to this record and Sid Barrett's vision. True story. Some of their later albums, as he mentioned, Wish You Were Here, they look back to Sid specifically and write about Sid and Sid's feelings about the world. And basically, Sid was a lost cause. Was it drugs that did Sid in? I don't think so. I don't think it was. I think Sid was David Gilmour said so much himself. I think this was going to happen to Sid. The drugs may have exacerbated it. They may have intensified it. They may have made it all happen faster, but I think it was inevitable. When this is a very creative individual, a very imaginative individual. This record is full of just childlike, almost verses, fairy tale verses, and they work really well. A lot of it is psychedelic pop, really psychedelic pop, but there are a couple songs in this record that definitely point in the direction of Pink Floyd's future, and those are Astronomy Domine and also Interstellar Overdrive, the instrumental. These two songs are kind of a bridge between psychedelic rock and the space rock that would follow Pink Floyd later. I'm a huge fan of Lucifer Sam on this record, which I think was a song. It's about a cat, okay? And I don't know if it was Sid's cat or what, but it actually sounds better in mono. A lot of people deliberate about this record. Does it sound better in stereo or mono? I say stereo, personally. That's my opinion. Other than Lucifer Sam, that's great in mono. But yeah, this record is an absolute masterpiece, and I don't think anyone is ever going to fully grasp Pink Floyd, truly, unless they go back and listen to this record. It is it's a full-fledged masterpiece. My number 4, Pink Floyd, Piper at the Gates of Dawn, with Sid Barrett as the leader for the one record.
Great choice. The nice thing about a band like Pink Floyd is you really can't fault anybody's choices and what their 5 favorites are.
No.
Any of their albums could have easily been in either one of our top 5. So great choice. Number 3, this is an album. I knew The Wall when this album was out. And in 1981, I think it was, maybe 1980. What year did The Wall come out? 80? 79?
79.
79. This was probably 81 that we went to. My father drove me halfway across the country to Nebraska to meet my grandfather, who I didn't know too much when I was younger, and who lived outside of Omaha, Nebraska, and my dad's half brother, my uncle Ken, who would have been 12 at the time, 13 maybe, and Ken was probably 20, and he knew I was coming. He knew I liked music, and he wrote down a bunch of hard rock acts for me to listen to, and I told him, I really liked The Wall, and I remember being in the basement, and he had a motorcycle, and he had an errand to run. And he's like, hey, put these headphones on, listen to this. He's like, it's one song, and I'll be back before this song's over. And little did I know that it was the 23-minute song Echoes that appears on Metal, released 52 years ago today, incidentally.
Really? Is today Metal's birthday?
It was released on November 13th. Yep.
In the UK, right?
I don't know if that's the US release or the UK release.
Okay. Is that your number 3?
Metal is my number 3 album. I'm sure it's going to come up again later.
I
And
think it is.
the
And
23-minute Echoes is just an
yeah,
incredible composition, musicianship, and everything. Also has One of These Days. One of These Days, I'm going to cut you into little pieces. A Pillow of Winds, Fearless, Saint-Tropez, Seamus. Great album beginning to end. Easily a 9 out of 10 album for me. But just one that means just a little bit more to me than Wish You Were Here. But a fantastic album nonetheless.
This, by the way, everyone, this is the British cover. This is not the American cover. The American cover looks different. And Jim's right. I'm not going to say where it's going to come, but you're going to hear about this one again later. But this is Jim's number 3, Metal. My number 3, going to a record that you all know and love, and it is going to be, for me, The Wall. And this is Pink Floyd at their most theatrical. This record obviously took a lot of inspiration from Tommy. We mentioned 2112 when we did the Rush episode, which no one apparently watched, about 2 months ago. And I pointed out that I always felt that the story side of 2112 took a lot of inspiration from Tommy. Well, so did this. The difference is this one's better than Tommy. And that's no knock on Tommy. This record's a 10 out of 10. It's another masterpiece. It's a very powerful emotional statement. And I certainly, relate with this record. It was inspired by a character based upon, we're going to mention this name again, Syd Barrett, and also Roger Waters himself. The character, I believe it was a Pink, Jim, was kind of a combination of Roger Waters' persona and Syd Barrett's persona. And the band never forgot about Syd, and he was utilized time and time again in their themes and motifs. And this is a powerful artistic statement about withdrawal. It's about someone who builds a wall around themselves from the outside world. And that's the thing. And the other thing about this record, the influence of this record is enormous, by the way, because I can't think of any other record that's ever been recorded that equally influenced Queensryche and Kate Bush. You can't really get any further apart than that, can you?
Yeah.
But this was an enormous influence on both Queensryche and Kate Bush. And the songs on here,
thousands of others,
and there's even a photo of Kate Bush with this very famous photo with the wall in the background. Of course, David Gilmour discovered Kate Bush. That's how that went. But the songs on here are great. Obviously, Waiting for the Worms, Hey You, Mother, Goodbye Blue Sky, Young Lust, Run Like Hell, and of course, maybe the most emotional guitar solo ever conceived, and that is Comfortably Numb. So Wall is my number 3.
Yeah, great choice. That's the first one I remember hearing as a kid. Was when I was roughly 12, 13 years old. That was the first album I ever heard by them. I remember hearing Another Brick in the Wall Part 2, the whole We Don't Need No Education part. And at the time, a sixth grader or whatever I was at the time, to me, that was just the most perfect thing. So fantastic album. Again, can't fault your choice there. All right, on to number 2. Well, number 2 for me, it's one of the most sold albums of all time. It's the picture behind me, Dark Side of the Moon.
Do we really? Obligatory cover photo. All right. Yeah. Yes. So
on carnival mirrors, T-shirts, probably just from a whole marketing standpoint, that symbol almost became like the symbol of Pink Floyd. I don't think it was ever their official logo or anything, but you knew what that symbol meant, and to this day, you know that symbol is Pink Floyd. You know, anytime you see that symbol on something, they don't even, you know, the mirrors that you would see in the album, nothing says Pink Floyd in big writing on it. It just, you know it's Pink Floyd from that. And I mean, everybody knows the song Speak to Me, Breathe, On the Run, Time, Great Gig in the Sky, which is a fantastic song. Money, Us and Them, Any Cover You Like, Brain Damage, Eclipse, ending with there is no dark side of the moon really. And, the spoken passages in between and this, The Wall, yeah, was influenced by Tommy, but it was also obviously heavily influenced by their own Dark Side of the Moon album. I mean, you see a lot of those elements from Dark Side of the Moon pop up again throughout their other albums, but more specifically The Wall. And it was, to me, at this point, the band was still a bit of a cohesive unit, even though there was some fracture in there. They were still all creating for the album, and I think that's when they were at their best, when the four of them were creating together. Even though I think Roger Waters is a genius in a lot of his solo projects, same with David Gilmour. There was, if I was reviewing the whole catalog, there was probably one from each of their catalogs that I could have included in the top five for the Pink Floyd and its subsidiaries, I guess you could say. But for me, Dark Side of the Moon is number 2.
Great pick. And like you, my number 2 is also going to be Dark Side of the Moon. That is my number. Great minds think alike, right?
Yeah.
It's my number 2. And I wasn't sure where it was going to fall. I knew it was going to be in my top 5. It's too powerful visually not to be in the top 5. And yes, we have heard these songs a million times, but for whatever reason, it's held up so well. One thing I want to say about this record, I'm going to say a couple things about this record. Side 1 of this record, both sides are great, by the way. This record is, this is an 11 out of 10. Okay, it's probably one of my 20 favorite records of all time, and I say that even though there's one song. Well, I like the song. Okay, I like the song, but I don't necessarily think it fits on the record. And that song is Money. I feel like Money would have, which is a great song, would have better fit on Wish You Were Here.
Yeah, I don't.
Or maybe even Animals.
Yeah.
I just, it doesn't have like the ethereal flow of the rest of these songs. It doesn't have the cosmic feel. It's more of a rock song, whereas the rest of the album is really not rock. What is it? It's art rock, right? Ethereal, cosmic, just this beautiful flow. It's like you're floating in the stars and you're meditating. Then Money comes on, and I do like the song a lot, and I can see why it did very well as a single, but it just doesn't. It's not great within the flow of the record. But this record's still 11 out of 10. There are other records I love, like Moving Pictures, like Limelight's not a favorite of mine. Sign of the Times by Prince, I'm not really that keen on. You Got the Look. So there's always records but in the case of Money, I actually like the song. It just doesn't flow well with the rest of the album for some reason. But side 1 of this record just brings me to tears.
Yeah.
It's that beautiful. The Great Gig in the Sky never fails to make me cry.
Yeah.
It just doesn't. Clara Torrey's vocals on it it was a great addition. It's kind of like, it has a much more profound impact on the song than, say, Sandy Denny on the Led Zeppelin song. What is it? Over the Battle of Evermore. Difference in Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin, really, and these were the two huge bands that we grew up with, is that Led Zeppelin looked outward. They looked to adulation. They looked to world domination. Pink Floyd, they looked inward. They looked into their soul. They looked deep within themselves to make their art. And that's why I love them so much. And this whole side, Time, On the Run, which was the blueprint for Radiohead, on both OK Computer and to a lesser degree Kid A. And it opens up with Speak to Me, Breathe, which is just delicate and beautiful. Not only is it cosmic, it's just beautiful. Side 2 is no slouch. Us and Them, Any Color You Like, Brain Damage, Eclipse. What can you say about this record? Its iconic status is well deserved. It's my number 2. It never fails to bring me to tears. Side 1.
I'm glad you mentioned Clara Torrey's name. I could not think of it for the life of me when I was talking about that album, and I had failed to write it down in my notes. So, did she ever do anything else?
I don't know. I really don't know. I'm not sure. I think she's pretty much known for this being on Great Gig in the Sky. It's kind of her claim to fame, and I know she was paid very well for that. I think I don't know the whole story behind that, but she did a great job, and their inclusion of her was genius.
Yeah. All right, on to our number ones. My number one, if you would have talked to me 35 years ago, 40 years ago even, would have probably been 5 or 6 on my list of this band's, of my favorite albums at the time. But the whole Orwellian philosophy, I've learned to understand better over the last 40 years of my life. And of course, I've talked about it here on the channel before. My favorite Pink Floyd album is Animals. Pigs on the Wing, Dogs, Pigs, 3 different ones, Sheep, and the reprise of Pigs on the Wing.
There you go, everyone.
Just a great look into the society at the time, socialism, and some other things that were going on in the world at the time of its release. And to me, this album is just timeless. It's another one where it's the 4 of them working together. The musicianship, the composition, the production, all of it to me is just spot on. Maybe not as refined as Wish You Were Here in a lot of the areas, but a little more, yes, looking inward for the inspiration, but looking to the outward, the George Orwell writings of George Orwell, looking to that for the inspiration for the album as well.
But they flipped it.
Yeah.
They flipped it.
Yeah.
They flipped Animal Farm. They flipped it. And it's kind of like, it's one of those records, like Tree. Oh, not it's not a record, like Trees by Rush. Is you can take it in different ways. I said this before. Animals is definitely a masterpiece, and this is how strong Pink Floyd's catalog is. It was my 3rd favorite record of 1977, but it's not among my favorite 5 Pink Floyd records. It's their most progressive record without any question. It's their most vitriolic record. It has almost kind of a punk rock feel to it, even though it's a progressive rock record. But yeah, it's another deep record. That's what they do. They make deep records, right?
Yeah. All right, let's hear your number 1. I think I know what it is.
Yeah, you've already mentioned it, and there's nothing else it could be. It's one of my 10 favorite records of all time. It's only one of 3 or 4 records that I have a couple copies of. I have a couple copies of. Oh, no, it doesn't matter. I have a couple copies of A Kiss in the Dream House, different versions of that, because that record means more to me than everything, record-wise. But I have a couple copies of David Bowie Low and also Prince Sign of the Times that are variants. But it's got to be Pink Floyd Metal for me, and I actually did bring this one down here. This is the American cover of Metal. Okay, I showed you the UK cover before when Jim had it as number 3 pick. The US cover is a little different. It's got more of a sea blue kind of a color to it, as you can see. And this one is one of my favorite records that I own. I got this for like literally $15. I don't know what they were thinking at the record store, but it's actually an Israeli pressing of, and it says Pink Floyd Metal with Echoes. I mean, how cool is this? I just love the cover variation on this. I don't know when this was not 1971. This record was released in 1971. This is the best transitional record ever recorded. I've talked about transitional records before. Some other transitional records that I adore are David Bowie's Station to Station and Susie and the Banshees Kaleidoscope. Those are, for me, the other two big ones, but this is the greatest transitional record of all time. It looks forward to Dark Side of the Moon and even Wish You Were Here, but mainly Dark Side of the Moon, but it also looks back at their psychedelia. It fits right in between. It has a perfect balance between the more concise, clear, shorter form songs that you're going to get on the ethereal flowing album that is Dark Side of the Moon, but it also looks back at the psychedelia. And we did a episode on scary albums a couple weeks ago. Actually, metal could have made that record, not that record, but that show. One of these days, well, I wouldn't say it's harrowing. It's, it's still a walk in the park lyrically. And it's kind of a dark sounding song, but Echoes is, with all due respect to Rush and Genesis, and I've mentioned, and Kate Bush also, I've mentioned great album sides that are conceptual. In the past, Kate Bush, The Ninth Wave, Rush 2112 and Hemispheres, and also Genesis with Supper's Ready, well, Foxtrot. Echoes is without a question my favorite, like, long form album side ever created. It is stunningly visual. I mean, it is so visual. It kind of meets the subaquatic and the atmospheric simultaneously. It feels like you're underwater, but it also feels like you're floating in space.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful balance between that. And well, beyond Echoes, some of the other songs on here were so, I love Fearless. It's like, even with the soccer chants, it's got like a kind of a folky vibe, but it's also kind of spacey at the same time. I mentioned One of These Days, a pretty dark song, but has kind of a mysterious element to it. And Saint-Tropez is wonderful. I love Saint-Tropez. It's kind of like an exotic, deep, I don't know. There's something about Saint-Tropez. It's got even a little bit of jazz infused on it. And I think this is pretty close to a perfect record. And metal for me is Israeli cover, US pressing. It's definitely an 11 out of 10, and it's one of my 10 favorite records of all time. It's about as artistic as you can possibly get. And I want to mention one more thing about Dark Side of the Moon before we cut off. I was always really enamored with the whole mythos behind The Wizard of Oz and Dark Side of the Moon. The Wizard of Oz, if anyone knows me, really, it's my favorite movie of all time. It always has been, actually, for whatever reason. And I was intrigued by the fact that people said that they, Roger and David and Rick and Nick, they somehow tried to sync it to The Wizard of Oz. Well, that's not possible because the movie's a lot longer than the album, obviously. But it's still intriguing to think about it. And I always thought to myself, what if someone actually really did try to sync the music of someone to something literary or musical and turn it into something really cinematic? And, there's something about that thought that has always appealed to me. So
Interesting. Yeah, I've always heard that too about the Wizard of Oz and how you could sync them together. And that was my first thought was, what's an hour and a half movie and a 43-minute album?
I don't believe for a second they actually tried to do that.
Yeah.
But I again, the mythos behind it always, it's very fascinating, and it makes for great legend.
Yeah.
And I feel like someone actually needs to do that at some point, with not with Pink Floyd necessarily, but with someone's music, and turn it into this cinematic spectacle.
Well, they kind of did that with the Wall movie,
Yeah, I mean,
Tommy movie.
yeah, but I feel like with Dark Side, of course, it was with the Wizard of Oz, the legend, of course, it has more of a, it's more in the fairy tale kind of a element than, say, the
Yeah.
Wall, which the Wall is like brutal reality in a lot of ways, whereas Dark Side is the whole feel of the record. It's not fairy tale-esque by any means, but when you look at it with the Wizard of Oz, then it becomes fairy tale-esque, right?
Yeah.
And to think that someone believed that they did that, which I don't believe for a second that they did, but it always makes you think about what if someone actually did something like that, because it's never actually been done before. And you look at that, and someone might take some inspiration from that and perhaps use a different artist.
Yeah. Interesting. Folks, thanks for joining us. Hopefully you're still with us. Sorry we went on a little longer than we would have hoped tonight, but obviously it's a band that means a lot to both of us. So we apologize for that. Thanks for joining us. Again, this is our last episode of the year. Go back and watch our back catalog to keep you busy during the winter months coming up. We'll see you in January. If you're in Columbus, come out and see Midnight Clear. We'll be on the road near you. A couple dates in Kentucky as well. Jeff, you got anything to promote?
I'm going to be sitting in a room when I'm not working, writing my ass off.
Well, good. Look forward to reading more from you. So,
like I never have done before.
Have a good holiday season, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you next year.
Happy birthday,